August the 12th, 2025. Guys, you're looking at new images of Comet Atlas 3I. And we're starting to get some of the things down to where we can see kind of a solid core or solid inside section of the comet. There's no tail. Now, it has sped up in speed, which in the beginning we were talking about a non-gravitational acceleration event to where the planets weren't affecting it. But now it is between Mars and Jupiter, and it's starting to speed up. But it's not headed straight to the sun, so it kind of doesn't make sense. It's going to be wider than that out beyond the orbit of Earth. And so technically at that angle, and the sun's far to the right, guys, pulling on it from that side, this object should be slowing down, not speeding up. Now, if it was headed straight to the sun, like we see a lot of sun diving comets and things like that, they do accelerate because they're getting close to that, what I call a ricochet or a slingshot around the Earth. We saw Comet Atlas do it, and it split into a million pieces, which will one day be a future Ison meteor shower. But if we dig deeper into this, I want to show you a couple more images. But I think we're dealing with more than one object, and Paul and I, we were getting ready for that webinar today, and we talked about this extensively. But I think we've got at least 3, maybe 4 objects inside that dark nuclei right there. And going back and looking at this image, and this is the one that I put on Space Weather a couple of weeks ago, guys. No one has gotten this close. I don't care what kind of satellite or telescope they've got. They just don't have it. And what I'm looking at right now, this is the very center of that solid, it looks like a solid group inside of that object, right? But if you look at it very closely, there's an object right here, there's one here, possibly right behind it, and a much larger object right there. And what we could be seeing, there's no tail again. This is the kind of the front of it, the forward motion. And I think a lot of this is light distortion from a forward shock wave. But what I can tell you is this isn't. They're very clear, and possibly one behind it. And just like in jets in a military formation, I've sat on my sailboat for a couple of years and watched the Blue Angels practice a couple of times a week, sometimes right over my head, very close to the ground, and they will fly so close together that radar would indicate one object. You understand what I'm saying? In very close proximity. I'm not saying that what this is yet, but again, when it first came across Jupiter, it was not accelerating, but now it is at about 144,000 miles, I think, per hour. It's very fast. I calculated it, and I do remember this fact. It can go 30 miles in 2 seconds. So by the time you said 1, 2, you'd be 30 miles away from where the point you are now. And it is accelerating. So again, the non-gravitational acceleration thing is out unless it's doing it itself. Now, we don't know what the objects are in here. And I will challenge anyone that wants to tell me, how are you getting that close? I explained it to Paul and Iggy tonight on the webinar, or the getting ready for the webinar. But guys, I think we're dealing with multiple objects. They're speeding up. And if you remember the PDF, I have a copy of it from Avi Loeb that he was on just before I was on the webinar with Paul today. But he had talked about intelligent things happening here. And one of the things he mentioned, and we know from looking at the JPL, that this thing will come in retrograde into the inner solar system. Right now, it's halfway between Jupiter and Mars. And it's flying very low, just above the ecliptic. In other words, if you could turn the whole solar system up on one edge and you looked at it, the planets wouldn't be in a perfect elliptic orbit. You'll see some below or some slightly tilted and all of that. But what we're seeing here is something that hasn't ever been seen before, moving at the speed, at the size, the island of Manhattan, they think. But what I'm saying is that size is predicated, I think, on multiple objects that are moving so fast and so far away that unless you know how to dig deep into it, you're not going to see it. So, with 3 objects coming in, Avi Loeb talked about coming in retrograde against the orbit of the planets. In other words, you got the Sun, you got Earth, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, and Jupiter kind of involved in this scenario. They're moving counterclockwise around the Earth. But the way that this object is coming into our ecliptic, very low on the horizon, almost skating the horizon of the ecliptic, right now it's in the middle of the asteroid belt. Now, it's not supposed to hit any of the planets. You know, they talk about close approaches, but it's not that close, but it is lined up to where if you were going to get close to 3 planets on an interstellar movement like we're seeing on this fast-speeding object, then that would be a perfect projection. Now, going back to Avi Loeb, he mentioned that the way it was set up, this thing could pull in behind any of the planets, Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars, on the inner orbit or the exit orbit, and do what's called a parking orbit. That's why it's coming in retrograde. And you do have 3 objects there, at least 3, possibly 4 in the middle right there. And we'll see as we get closer to it. But again, I think the forward section is what, again, when you're going so fast in a jet airplane, you have that, you've got a burst in front of it, right? You'll see the sonic booms and all of that. And I think that's what this is what you're seeing in the front. As it gets closer, we'll be able to filter out more of the noise and get down to these 2 objects. But again, with 3 objects that we're looking at least 3, and Avi Loeb talking about this thing could do a parking orbit behind any of 3 planets. It could also split apart and do a parking orbit behind 3 or more planets. But the closer it gets to the sun, which is not going to be like Sun, get behind and explode into millions of pieces, but will we see a denigration of the gravitational magnetic connection between these objects and see them start to spread apart? I don't know, but it's very interesting. Again, we talked about it quite a bit today. Let me show you just a couple of other images. Now, with this one, what we're seeing, again, we cannot see deep into it, but what I can tell you from looking at it is I can see an increase in speed because it did not have this far of backscattering. But there's no tail. So I don't think it's a comet. I'm not sure what it is. It looks like a big rock as big as Manhattan Island. But again, this is backward scattering, not a tail. Right in here is what we looked at very closely just a few moments ago. But it's breaking down into basically kind of heat signatures at this point. But again, we do not know what it is. I just wanted to bring you this update, let you check it out for yourself. But I think we're dealing with multiple objects. It's a heads up, guys. Be safe.